During the Second World War, the responses to Nazi rule in occupied countries varied widely, ranging from genuine resistance to outright collaboration, with many forms of accommodation falling somewhere in between. The people in these occupied territories faced incredibly difficult choices as they navigated the harsh realities of life under the Nazi regime, balancing their personal survival, moral beliefs, and national loyalties. The oppressive nature of Nazi rule, combined with its often brutal enforcement, left few options for those living under occupation, and each person's response was shaped by a unique set of circumstances, pressures, and motivations. Acts of genuine resistance emerged in nearly every country occupied by the Nazis, driven by a desire to undermine the occupiers, fight for liberation, and protect those targeted by the regime. Resistance took many forms, from organized armed movements to clandestine activities like publishing underground newspapers, sabotaging German supplies and communications, and hiding or smuggling Jews and other persecuted groups to safety. In France, the resistance grew into a widespread movement composed of diverse political groups, including communists, socialists, and nationalists, who coordinated acts of sabotage against German troops and infrastructure and provided intelligence to the Allies. In Poland, the resistance movement, known as the Home Army, conducted acts of sabotage and engaged in guerrilla warfare against German forces while supporting efforts to shelter Jews from the Holocaust. In Denmark, a unique form of resistance emerged in 1943 when the Danish resistance, with widespread support from ordinary citizens, organized a mass rescue operation that saved the vast majority of the country's Jewish population by smuggling them across the sea to neutral Sweden. In Norway, Greece, Yugoslavia, and the Netherlands, resistance movements engaged in a variety of activities, from armed uprisings to secret networks that distributed information, provided escape routes, and disrupted Nazi operations. However, those who participated in such resistance often faced severe consequences if caught, including arrest, torture, deportation to concentration camps, or execution. Resistance was a dangerous endeavor, and those involved had to operate in secrecy, knowing that their actions could result in brutal reprisals against themselves, their families, or their communities. In contrast to resistance, there were also acts of collaboration, where individuals, groups, or even entire governments chose to cooperate with the Nazi occupiers for various reasons. Some saw collaboration as a way to maintain a degree of autonomy or protect their interests under occupation. For instance, in Vichy France, the government led by Marshal Philippe Pétain willingly cooperated with the Nazis, believing that collaboration could safeguard France from further destruction and maintain a semblance of independence. In other cases, collaboration was driven by ideological sympathy with Nazi goals, such as the establishment of local fascist parties in countries like Belgium and the Netherlands, where groups like the Rexists and the Dutch National Socialist Movement, NSB, actively supported the Nazi regime. These groups often helped the Nazis in identifying and persecuting Jews, communists, and other resistance members. In Eastern Europe, particularly in territories such as Ukraine, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, some local collaborators, driven by anti-Soviet sentiment or nationalist aspirations, joined Nazi paramilitary units or served in auxiliary police forces, assisting in the execution of mass murders and deportations, including the Holocaust. While some collaborators were motivated by ideology, others saw cooperation as a pragmatic choice, a way to survive or gain favor under the new power structure. However, collaboration often came at a significant moral and ethical cost, as it could involve direct participation in or complicity with the atrocities and crimes committed by the Nazis. Between the extremes of resistance and collaboration, many people in occupied countries chose acts of accommodation, navigating a precarious middle ground. For most civilians, daily life under Nazi rule involved a complex set of compromises and adjustments. Acts of accommodation were often motivated by the need to survive and protect one's family in a hostile and dangerous environment. These acts might include following the basic rules imposed by the Nazis, continuing to work in their jobs under occupation, or cooperating with the authorities just enough to avoid punishment. In countries like Belgium and the Netherlands, many local officials and businesses continued their work under German supervision, finding ways to accommodate the occupiers while trying to limit the damage done to their communities. Some individuals, while not openly collaborating, chose to work for the occupying forces in positions such as translators, administrators, or even labourers in factories producing goods for the German war effort. Accommodation could also involve subtle forms of resistance, such as complying with orders in ways that were slow, inefficient, or incomplete, which allowed people to show minimal cooperation without fully supporting the Nazi cause. For those living under Nazi rule, the choice between resistance, collaboration, and accommodation was rarely straightforward. The decisions people made were often driven by a combination of fear, pragmatism, ideology, and circumstance. In some cases, the lines between these responses were blurred. Individuals who initially accommodated the Nazis might later join resistance movements, while others who began as collaborators might have done so under duress or coercion. The brutal consequences of defiance or dissent often led people to weigh their options carefully, considering the risks not just to themselves but also to their families and communities. Many who chose resistance did so knowing it could mean death or imprisonment, while those who chose collaboration often faced social ostracism or retribution after the war. Acts of accommodation, meanwhile, allowed people to navigate the complexities of daily life under occupation, often in ways that were neither openly defiant nor fully complicit. Ultimately, these varied responses reflected the harsh reality of living under Nazi rule, where every choice carried significant moral, ethical, and personal consequences in a time of unprecedented conflict and oppression.